Showtime. Good. Okay. Should we get him up now? Sure. Let's do that. Okay. Hi, good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for coming to Zarwell Yacht Club. I realize that tonight is not the best of nights to be going out. You know, we've had a lot of rain, we're gonna have more rain and more snow, etc. My name is Tom Kowalski, and I'm one of the staff commodores here, and I help run this program on Wednesday evenings, the third Wednesday of every month. And we have a full agenda pretty much through the end of the year. Matter of fact, one of our speakers for June is here with us. She will be speaking on shark research on San Francisco Bay. So that's something to look forward to for June of this year. Tonight is a review of yacht racing. Jeff Zarwell, many of you know, is, I think, considered to be one of the premier mark set people on the West Coast. If you have a question about mark sets, talk to Jeff, because it comes down to. We have an active racing program, as you know, and a cruising program, et cetera, et cetera. So, kindly welcome to Zarwell Yacht Club, Mr. Jeff Zarwell.
Thank you. And I apologize up front. I had a cold about a month ago, but I still haven't gotten my voice back all the way. So it's going to be a little weak. Fortunately, I got a microphone. So, let's see here. Get the screen back up. There we go. So what this talk is about is for people who are interested in getting on race committee and want to get an idea of what goes on race committee for running a sailboat race. And sailing is a Corinthian sport, and as a result, the people that run the races are by and large volunteers, so we always need more volunteers. You do not need to have a lot of experience in racing. It helps, but you don't have to have a lot of experience in racing in order to be on race committee. It's broken down into a number of small parts that makes it very easy for people to step in and get involved. So what we're going to talk about tonight is those different positions, and I passed out a book called Join the Race Committee Team, which is put out by U.S. Sailing. It explains in more detail what all the positions are, so we'll go through them tonight, and then at the end, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'm more than happy to answer them for you. After that, if you would like to come out with us for a race sometime to help on the race committee, you are more than welcome to do so. Any questions to begin with? Okay, so, fancy dancy clicker here. So this is Race Committee 101, basic concepts of running a sailboat race. And the bottom line is pretty much in most races, whoever finishes first wins the race. And here's some fin boats that guys are racing. So you've got a number of different disciplines. The most basic and easiest to understand is handicap racing, where somebody's got a Catalina 30 and somebody's got a Newport 36, whatever. They're different boats, but you're all racing together. There are handicap programs out there that handicap the boats so that we can do a time on time or time on distance correction to make up the speed differentials between the boats. That's what most people end up getting started with when they start racing. From there, you can go into different disciplines. It's just a nice picture of a catamaran with one of the hulls out of the water. You've got, as this says, a choice of around the buoys like this, or distance racing. A distance race would be the San Francisco to Vallejo race. The race from here to Vallejo, pretty cut and dry. Buoy racing is a close course race where normally the buoys are about a mile apart. You have a race that's between 4 and 8 miles in total length, depending upon the speed potential of the boats and the wind conditions, sea conditions, and so forth. So fleet racing, as I said, is, well, I didn't say, but handicap racing is fleet racing. So is one design racing. We'll get into that in a bit. But there's also match racing and team racing. Fleet racing is a fleet of boats racing. You can have 5, 6, 50, or 100 boats all racing. Match racing is 2 boats racing boat for boat, like the America's Cup. It used to be simpler to identify with the America's Cup before they got into all the foiling, because that's changed everything. But it's still 2 boats against each other. The slower boat can actually win by better, well, it used to be able to, in non-America's Cup racing, the slower boat can actually win if they have better tactics and better boat handling skills. Foiling has made that a challenge. Now, so when you get into the America's Cup type racing, it's usually whoever gets to the win first is going to win, and that's it. But that's a different story. And then there's team racing, where you'll have teams of 2-on-2, 3-on-3, or 4-on-4. And so, as an example, Sausalito Yacht Club might have a regatta with a 3-on-3. Sausalito Yacht Club would have a team with 3 boats. And let's say St. Francis Yacht Club would have a team with 3 boats. And those 6 boats race against each other in a race that runs about 6 minutes total. And the idea is to not necessarily win, but to have your 3 boats end up in a higher order on the overall than the other teams. So you may be the first place boat, but you may need to hold up and block a competitor's boat in order to get your team to move up. So a lot of different strategies. So here you've got your, I don't know if my pointer's gonna work very well. No, pointer doesn't work. But you have 2 circles, one design, handicap. In one design, it's typically a single manufacturer, like Santana 22s, Islander 36s, Catalina 36, whatever. Each, like all Catalina 36s racing against each other. Theoretically, they're identical. We know they're not, but theoretically they are. The one design fleet, if they're smart, will put enough controls in so that you can't deviate too much from the standard boat. So like the J105 fleet is one of the more popular fleets on San Francisco Bay. They annually weigh all the boats. Every boat comes out of the water and gets weighed by a fleet measurer, and they have a slight variance of what they will allow, but you may be adding or deleting weight from your boat, and you can't put it where you want it necessarily. The measurer will tell you where it has to be, so that it does not, so the placement of the weight does not actually improve your performance. Trying to keep it as fair as possible. Then you get into, so you'll have some where there's multiple manufacturers, like back in the early 2000s there were FAR 40s. FAR 40s were built by 3 different manufacturers, but they still had to all conform into a one design rule. Then you'll get into a box rule. A box rule is like the old America's Cup boats, the 12-meter boats. They call them 12 meters. There was a mathematical formula where the length, beam, displacement, sail area, ballast, blah, 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 all the stuff equaled 12 meters. It was a mathematical formula. So there was a lot of variance in the length of the boats by as much as 15 feet, but they still measured out with all those computations to 12 meters. Again, trying to make things as simple, as fair as possible, but that did mean that some boats were designed to be better upwind, some boats were designed to be faster downwind. So it was never quite as fair as they made it sound. And then there's developmental classes. Developmental classes are like an International 14. They started out as a one design fleet, started dying out, and they said, well, we got to find a way to keep this fleet active, so we will open up the rules a bit and allow you to experiment. And they give you quite a bit of leeway as far as what you can do. But it does mean if your boat's 10 years old, it is not going to be competitive unless you do some major modifications to that boat. But that all gets really a lot more convoluted than what you need to worry about on race committee, or even if you want to get into racing. Because racing, you're just going to be on the handicap side starting out. You've got these handicap formulas, which are PHRF, Performance Handicap Rating Formula, Portsmouth Yardstick, International Rule. Then you have meter classes, one design keel boats. Those are your one design fleets that overlap. And then handicap, low production, custom designs. So if you built a special boat and there's nobody else has a boat like yours, you obviously can't race one design. You're going to race in handicap. And that could be PHRF, and there's been a whole bunch of different handicap rules over the years, IMS, IOR, blah, 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 all of that. But the most popular one, on the West Coast at least, is PHRF. And almost every club here uses PHRF, Performance Handicap Rating Formula. So there's a basic calculation for your boat based on the length, overall length of the water line, your displacement, your beam, sail area, and so forth. And they figure out what your boat can theoretically do in a nautical mile in given wind conditions. Now, nobody thinks they have a fair rating. Nobody. Nobody ever said, my rating is phenomenal. They always say, no, I'm getting cheated. Well, since everybody feels that way, it's probably pretty fair. And the performance part of that formula is, if you have like when a new boat comes out, let's say J Boats comes out with a J40 and it's a new design. The PHRF committee for US Sailing is going to come up with a calculation for that. But if you start winning every single race, your handicap's gonna get hit. Because it's based on performance, they did something wrong, they have to adjust your handicap. So when building a fleet, they try not to put a lot of hot shots on a boat because they want to make sure their handicap stays as good as possible and sell more boats. But if a lot of hot shots take that class, then all of a sudden that boat gets a better rating, or a worse rating, I should say, and it makes it more difficult for them to win. But it's designed to try and keep things as fair as possible. What really frustrates a lot of sailors is that they may have a boat that's 20 years old and they're racing against other boats that are 20 years old, but they haven't redone the bottom paint on their boat in 4 years. Their sails are 10 years old and they don't have any good racers on the boat. Well, Performance Handicap assumes that you have a nice clean racing bottom, that you have good sails that are not stretched out, and you have a really good crew on board. So if you can't meet the criteria there, no, you're not going to do well. But that's like racing in any sport. Offshore racing rule is completely different, and same with Offshore Racing Congress. Those are other handicap formulas we don't need to get into, but just so you have an idea, there's a whole bunch of different ways to be in a sailboat race. So the organizational structure starts out with World Sailing. It used to be called ISAF's International Sailing Federation. Then they changed it to World Sailing. The US Sailing used to be the US Yacht Racing Union. When World Sailing changed from ISAF to World Sailing, they said that all the countries had to go by their country name and then sailing, so US Sailing. Then you have your regional associations. Here we have the Yacht Racing Association, which kind of governs all the racing on San Francisco Bay and Northern California. It's kind of sad, in the last 15 years their role has really dropped a lot. They've lost the buy-in from a lot of the yacht clubs, but they still are in existence. And then you get into the clubs, the individual yacht clubs like Soft Sail Yacht Club here, and then you get down at the bottom there are class, one design class fleets. So that's kind of the organizational structure. So if you're in a Tartan 10, you're going to belong to a yacht club who belongs to the Yacht Racing Association, who belongs to US Sailing, who belongs to World Sailing. And if you were to file a protest where somebody has done you wrong, and you've lost that protest and you wanted to appeal, you would go up that ladder. And I've been unfortunately involved in appeals that have gone up that ladder all the way to World Sailing, and they said, we aren't going to approve the protest. The guy still wanted it heard, so now there's a new law that says that if you exhausted all of these, you may now go to your national authority, back to US Sailing, which passed a law that says you can file a lawsuit. And I was actually sued by a competitor. Myself, Vicky Sidaro from San Francisco Yacht Club and US Sailing, we were sued because this gentleman wanted his protest heard. And I went through all of this, got denied every single time. He still wanted her, so I went to arbitration in San Francisco. We spent 11 hours in arbitration, and the arbitrator said, "I've heard enough, and I will give you a one-sentence decision tomorrow and a full written decision in 2 weeks, so the winner of this can go on the Worlds." And the guy that had filed the protest in the first place said, "That's okay, I'm not going to the Worlds regardless, I just want to make sure my protest was heard." So,
What was the sentence?
well, the problem was he didn't put up his protest flag in time.
What sentence?
It was denied because he didn't put his protest flag up in time. That was it. But there's a lot of, most protests don't go that way, but some protests occur, just like in any sport. And I gotta start moving along a little faster to get this thing going here. So from the governing authorities, we go on to various books that are available on the US Sailing website on handicap racing, one design racing, on case studies on protests and so forth. And then you get into what we're here to really talk about tonight is the race committee and and how things work. You start out with the race officials. So you have a race officer. I'm a race officer. In US Sailing, there are 3 levels of race officer. There's a club race officer. Steve over here is a club race officer. And we have some other members here who are regional race officers. A club race officer is certified as being capable of running any club level event. And club level events on the West Coast are different than the East Coast. But then you go into a regional race officer. On the East Coast, that means a different zip code. On the West Coast, that means San Francisco Bay, 9 zip codes. And then you go from there to national race officer. When you get to national race officer, you are qualified to run not only any race in the United States, but you're qualified theoretically to run any event anywhere in the world. And there is the Grand Poobah level, which is international race officer, and there are about 10 of those in the entire world. And surprisingly, they don't run all the big races. They do a lot of them, but they don't do a lot of them. So it's, they don't do all of them, excuse me. So those are a total of 4. There's 3 in each country, and then international, of course, is international. And then you have the judges. So those are the ones who hear the protests. So we just had a race last Saturday, Sausalito Yacht Club, and we had a collision where one boat hit another, and a boat was at fault. The guy admitted that it was at fault, but the insurance companies won't want to decide who was at fault. They want the protest committee to do that. So there's a protest hearing going on tomorrow night that will determine who was at fault. We know who it is. Both parties are in agreement, but it has to go through a formal process. And then that'll be decided. And then when the screen comes back up, we have umpires. So protests are typically held, well, they're always held after the race. Umpiring, which got started in match racing for the America's Cup back in the 80s, they used to race on the water all day, and they'd keep list of all these protests that they were doing. At the end of the day, they would spend hours and hours and hours in the protest room deciding who won each protest. It took too much time, so they came up with umpiring. So now there are umpires that give instant justice on the water. So you'll have 2 boats racing side by side. You'll have an umpire boat directly behind them watching for infractions, and you'll have what's called a wing boat off to the side looking for overlaps, because overlaps are a big deal. If you've established overlap, that controls what another boat can and cannot do. So that's what the umpires do. And then you have measurers who, as I mentioned earlier, actually measure the boats. When I go and do a world championship event, there's one day dedicated to everybody's sails being taken off their boat and measured to the millimeter for their size. And if they're off, you can't race unless you can get it fixed before the first race. So especially when you get into one design racing in the world classes, it gets very, very strict. So who actually races sailboats? Adults, men, women. There's a typical racer cruiser. You've got everybody sitting on the weather rail to provide ballast for the boat, so you can keep more sail area up, go as fast as possible. And this is a typical race course, which isn't really illustrated very well here. This is a windward leeward race. They start down here, they go up to the windward mark, they come down, they go through these two marks, which is called a gate, and then go around in either direction on these, back up, and then down to the finish. So that's a typical up and down course. That is what you will almost always find on a one design fleet race, because the boats are theoretically identical, have the same performance characteristics and so forth. So that's the fairest racing. And our job is to set the course up so that when they're sailing upwind, half the boats go up on the left-hand side of the course, half the boats go up on the right-hand side of the course, and conversely coming down, half go on the right-hand side and half go on the left-hand side. If they don't do that, we didn't get something right. And sometimes you can't avoid that, but that's your goal. When you get into handicap racing, you won't always do this, because some boats are better off the wind than on the wind, and you want to give every boat a leg that allows that boat to perform to its best potential. So you'll typically go with a more triangular course. And this is all the stuff that the club and the principal race officer, which is any race officer, club, racer, or club, regional, or national, if they're in charge of that race, they are the principal race officer. And this kind of stuff is talked about ahead of time, usually with the fleet, to find out what kind of courses they want based on the performance characteristics. Okay, the race committee is responsible for safety, fairness, and fun. So this is actually a picture off of Sausalito Yacht Club's boat Mercury. And you'll see Tim Prouty up there, for those of you know Tim, and I'm forgetting his name now. 1220. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Anyway, here we are running a race. This was a U.S. sailing event that we were putting on. So you have a signal boat, which is this boat. This boat is called a signal boat because traditionally the way everything's communicated from the race committee to the competitors is by flags and sound signals. The flags are the actual signal. The sound signal is to draw your attention to the flags are the visual signal, and then the sound signal is to draw your attention to the flag being raised. And each class will have their own class flag, so they know that they're now in their sequence, and there are other flags to indicate where you are in the sequence, and then what course you're sailing, so forth. Then you have a mark boat or several mark boats, and those are the people who put the marks out in the water. So you can, and years and years ago when I first got started in racing on the bay, back in the 70s, it was all fixed marks, or government marks that were out there, I should say. And you raced around those, and it may not be directly upwind, it may not be directly downwind, but it was what it was, and that's what you dealt with. Then they came along in the early 80s with the idea of inflatable marks, and that allowed us to put marks where we needed them to be to give the fairest courses possible. That necessitated the use of mark boats to be able to put those marks in the water. And then you've got safety boats. You won't see this too often in most adult races, but if it's catamaran, sometimes you will. If it's offshore boats, sometimes you will. You will always see them in junior events. In junior events, there will almost be as many safety boats as there are kids participating, because it's a big deal. We don't want anybody's child drowning out there. And then you have a scorer. So once everything has been written down throughout the day, you get back to the shore, and the scorer sits there in front of the computer and puts everything in to determine who the winners are. If it's one design, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it's handicap, the computer system, the program calculates the handicaps for you and prints them out in the order of corrected time finishes. So the signal boat, you have your principal race officer who's pretty much the conductor. And as a principal race officer, you would typically go out, make sure that boat is on station at least an hour before the first start. And I like to be out there an hour and a half before. Doesn't always work. The reason is you want to see what the wind is doing. Now Steve here can tell you that last Saturday the wind was very stable. It stayed in the same spot all day long. He put the marks in the water one time and then asked for permission to go over to the ramp and have a beer because there was nothing else to do. And we ran the race and he came back and he picked up all the marks. Is that about right?
Dead on.
We had a really challenging day last Saturday. The wind kept on changing directions, and every time it looked like it was going to hold for a while, I'd have him put the mark in that spot, and then it would change. And finally it was, this is midwinter racing, it's going to keep on moving around because the fun's coming through, we're going to do the best that we can, and we went with that, but we still had to move marks around a bit. So he got his workout. Jill was smart, and she couldn't make it Saturday, so she didn't have to deal with that. So then you have your timer, and once we go into sequence, the timer is kind of they actually kind of take over from the principal race officer, from what's going on with the boat. My eyes are outside the boat, looking at what the wind's doing, what the fleet's doing, what the fleet will tell me by their positions, how the start line's looking and so forth. And I may decide to stop the starting sequence to change the start line and make it look more fair to the competitors or something. But the timer is going through the time and making sure all the flags go up and come down at the proper times and everybody's paying attention. Then you go into the recorders. The recorders are people marking down which boats have shown up for the event, because depending on how the sailing instructions are written, there may be some penalties if it's a series race for you not showing up for today's races. So we want to make sure that we mark down who actually showed up and who has not. And then you have, at the end of the race, as the boats cross the finish line, your recorders are marking down the sail numbers as they finish, and if it's a handicap race, each of their times as they finish. And then you have people on flags who are putting the flags up, taking them down, and a lot of times there's a lot of crossover here. You try to have enough people to get all this covered with individuals on each function. I have run races by myself where I've done all of this. It's a lot of work, but it can be done. And then, so that was flags, recorders, flags through the visual signals, sounder. This used to be in the 1800s and early 1900s. This was a cannon being fired. Well, some people frowned on cannons, especially if there were projectiles included in them. So back in the 60s, they started using shotguns with blanks in them, and it was always black powder, so you get this big puff of smoke coming out, because if you're down at the far end of the line, you can see that cloud of smoke much sooner than you're going to hear the report of the shotgun blast coming down with the amount of time it takes for sound to travel. So that was very important. Unfortunately, a lot of flags got shot with blank shotgun shells. And I got hit in the face one time by somebody who didn't know how to handle a shotgun. So fortunately, that's now pretty much electronic. You press a button, it's a program that does all the sound signals for you. Don't have to worry about it. And we key the microphone, since there's no smoke, we key the microphone every time there's a sound signal, so that can be transmitted by VHF radio, and all the competitors can hear the sound signal at the same time. And then there's a wind reader. This is really important. Like last weekend, I don't know, did I ask you 60 times for what the wind was doing? When you're trying to set up a course and you're trying to see if and one of the reasons you go out early is to see what kind of pattern is developing in the wind shifts. And a lot of times we didn't Saturday, but a lot of times you can pretty much get an idea of what the wind is doing as it walks, in this case from east to west. And the only way you're going to know that is by constantly taking wind readers. So you like to have a person dedicated just to doing that. Any questions so far? I'm kind of breezing through this stuff. Yes?
How do you set the course in terms of the direction of the wind?
In a perfect world, what I would do is the windward mark would be directly upwind based on the breeze. So if I'm down in Berkeley Circle and we're getting a typical summer breeze, I should see the wind coming from about 240 degrees magnetic. So I will send you on an axis or a bearing of 240, which means you should see me at the reciprocal of that, which is minus 180 degrees to 060. That's the bearing you should see me. If you see me at 060 and you have the distance right, which you've used the GPS to determine that, then that should be where you are. That's a perfect world. So we don't have a perfect world on San Francisco Bay. Our wind can be perfect sometimes in the summer. 240, once it locks in, it can generally stay there all afternoon. The problem is we have current. And the current doesn't come where we typically run races directly up and downwind. So it's in some angle or another is coming across your course, which wants to push the boats one way. And so you have to compensate for that. But it's also changing throughout the day. So what worked this time going to windward isn't going to work next time going to windward. So you're constantly adjusting for that. Now, if you go someplace like Lake Union in Seattle, Lake Union's 30 feet deep, all across the entire lake, because it's a man-made lake. It has no current. So you think, okay, piece of cake. No, because they get wind shifts because of thermals in the mountains. So the wind is constantly doing this. And you can have a 40-degree shift going back and forth all day, and you just have to kind of figure out what's the average of that. And the only way you're going to do that is using that person who's a wind reader, taking wind readings every 5 minutes and writing them down. And there's electronics to do this now too, but on a lot of boats you're still going to have to write them down, and you just kind of get an average of what that wind is doing, and that's what you got to work with. I was on Lake Tahoe one time, and it was a mess. They told me where the wind was supposed to come from before we could get started. And we were watching it, and I had a guy that talked too much. And he was kind of driving everybody nuts in the boat. And I said, Tom, can you go up in the bow and take wind readings for me? I did it more to get him out of the cockpit of the boat, but it worked out very well. Every 2 minutes he took a wind reading. And you just saw this pattern developing, and it would only go so far, then it would backtrack a little bit, then it would go forward again, and then backtrack a little bit. So it was 3 steps forward and 1 step back. But you could see the progress going. So we were approaching the desired wind direction that we wanted to go, and that we wanted to get started with. So I set the lineup for that anticipated wind direction, and it was gambling on my part. But we went into sequence, because I can always stop the starting sequence. If the wind's not right, I can stop and we can start all over again. Now the competitors don't really like that, but they also don't like a line that's not square. So a guy from San Francisco Yacht Club is up at Tahoe, he's Zarwell. That is the worst start line I've ever seen. And it was at that point in time. But it's going along, and we're in this 5-minute sequence, and about 15 seconds before the start, the wind just went right there. It was all because this guy had sent to the bow to keep quiet, taking these phenomenal wind readings. We were able to figure out what happened, and we ended up having an absolutely perfect square start line. And the guy over San Francisco Yacht Club bought me a beer afterwards. I didn't tell him how the whole thing happened. I wasn't about to, but anyway. So those are the people on the signal boat, and this is a mark boat. That's a 19-foot boat they're on right there. The mark boats are for a more athletically inclined person, would you say? On a quiet lake, it's a piece of cake. On San Francisco Bay, we get ebb tide, wind coming against it, we get big waves, you get soaking wet, you're bouncing around like crazy, you're trying to put marks in the water, pull marks out, and so forth. It's not for the faint of heart, especially if I'm driving. Because I like to drive fast to get things done as quick as possible. It's a fun job, and it's really good if you're a racer, because you have a lot of time where you're not doing anything, where you can just sit and watch what the competitors are doing. So you get an unbiased perspective of what's going on the race course, which you can take and use for your racing down the road. So it's really good for that. So they break it down to the driver. The driver needs to know how to handle the boat, obviously, but they also need to know what the course should look like so they can put that boat in the right spot to get the mark where it's supposed to be. And then you have your anchor. In a lot of places, it's a lot of work. Here, we have a device called an anchor, which makes it a lot easier. But there's still a fair amount of work to it, especially when that ebb tide's coming at 6 knots and there's 30 knots of breeze blowing on. And then there's a recorder. We like to have a recorder on the boat, the mark boats. So, they can record boats as they're rounding the top mark and the bottom marks and so forth. So if there's a discrepancy in a race and somebody says, well, I lost my position and I was in second place. Well, when were you in second place? Well, at the top mark. Well, the recorder says you were in last place at the top mark. So what's the deal? Because people tend to make mistakes about their position when you're being granted redress to get repositioned within the fleet. So the mark boats being able to do that, take those recordings, really helps out. So you have safety boats, again, predominantly for junior sailing. You'll see a catamaran capsize there. There are ways to approach a capsized boat. There are techniques for pulling people out of the water. That's all very important. Usually safety boats are done by people who have a lot of experience doing that. It's not something you just go out and do the first time by yourself, unless you absolutely have to. And they'll have a helper. And in some fleets, they will have a jumper. A jumper is somebody in a wetsuit, sometimes even with dive gear, ready to jump out of the boat to save people. When I was working on the America's Cup, we had in 2011 through 2013, the organizing authority had hired a group called the Bergamo Scuba Angels. And these are the guys that jump out of helicopters at powerboat races when the powerboats flip over. And they've got dive tanks, everything, and they're all first aid trained and so forth. And they were on our support boats. So the catamarans, this is the first time we had catamarans as a fleet for the America's Cup. They could jump in the water and potentially save somebody's life. We had them throughout our tour of Europe. We had them all across the United States until we came back to San Francisco for the finals, in which case the organizing authority decided we didn't need them anymore, and that's when the catamaran capsized and the guy died because he was trapped underneath the trampoline. So it's important to have the safety divers out there, or the jumpers, I should say. So this is kind of a mess to look at because it's giving you 6 different kinds of courses on one chalkboard. So I'm going to go through these real quick to kind of make it a little clearer. You've got starts, you typically start down at the bottom of the course, and you're going to go up around the mark. This is triangular course, so you're going to go up. This would be a lot of times for handicap boats. Reach off to a reaching mark, come down, go back up, and then come straight down. What this does is, if your boat performs best on a reach, it gives you 2 reaching legs. If you're a boat that does best going directly downwind, you have a dead downwind lane. So it breaks it out so every boat in the handicap fleet is going to have an opportunity to be on their best point of sail. And then you get over here to something here where you've got a modified trapezoid course. They go up here, they go down, go up, and then go across, down, through a gate, and reach off to a finish. That's typically the 2 kinds of courses you'll see here. If it's not a normal up and down, which would be essentially this guy here, and these dotted lines are other courses you can put inside those. It's really kind of a confusing slide, but your bases are windward lure, triangle, and trapezoid. And trapezoids are really only used in junior sailing for multiple dinghies, fleets on the same course. And so you have one fleet on the up and down portion, and then other fleets going off on this reach and racing over here. But I just got denied for working on the 28 Olympics because I have no trapezoid experience. I'm a national race officer, but I have no trapezoid experience, and that is exclusively what they use in the Olympics. And it doesn't matter that I have 30 years as a national race officer. I haven't done any. I've done maybe 5 trapezoid races in my entire life, and that wasn't enough because that's all they use. But we don't do it here on San Francisco Bay, which is interesting because we're talking competitors from San Francisco Bay going to the Olympics to race in trapezoids, but we don't practice with trapezoids here. It is what it is. So here's the typical committee boat. I shouldn't say typical, this is a committee boat. They've taken a catamaran, put a top deck on there with some digital boards. And this is the time to start. And this is the bearing to the windward mark. You've got your race committee up there. This flag here indicates that it's the laser class. That's that class's insignia. And there should be an orange flag. They're using an orange post there to designate the start line. And then this flag being a black pennant, I don't know exactly what that means because there is a black flag, but that would be rectangular. That is definitely a pennant, so I don't know what that is. But anyway, that's the layout that some boats use. So you have your flags, shapes, and placards to give signals. You have your sounds to indicate when these flags go up. And then there's VHF radio is a courtesy only. And we try and call out all the boats that may start across the start line early. As a courtesy, we tell them that they have crossed the line early. But that is not, if they don't hear us, that is not grounds for redress. So all we have to do is make the effort. If they can't hear it, it's not our fault because it is their responsibility to know that whether they are over early or not. Now what's coming out are some new electronics. We will be working with them in March, and the J105 fleet is putting a beacon on each of their boats. It has to be in the exact same position on every single one of their boats. We will have beacons on our starting mark and on our Sigma boat. And as the boats approach the start line, we can sit there in front of the fireplace here, and we can see who crosses the start line early and who doesn't. And they will be notified visually and audibly on their boats with a flashing red light and a horn to let them know that they were over early. So it's going to be interesting. This is all brand new, but we'll be testing that next month. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Okay, so starting sequence. How do we start this thing? Well, it's the normal is a 5-minute start. So you're a class, and your class's insignia, say, is blue over white pennant. When that pennant goes up, that is your warning signal of 5 minutes before your start. 1 minute later, the P flag, which is blue with a white square in the middle, is your preparatory flag. That is when the racing rules, there are different rules that you have to deal with when sailing around the bay, and then there are the racing rules when you actually start racing. When the P flag goes up, the racing rules take effect. So the first minute, normal right-of-way rules. After that, though, the racing rules take in effect. And then 1 minute before the start, that P flag will come down to indicate to them, and these all have sound signals, to indicate to them that it's 1 minute to your start. And then when their class flag comes down, that is the start. So that's what we do in the signal. We get those flags up, we get them down, make sure the sounds get made, and we call them over early if they're over early. Okay, contrary to popular belief, practice races are not for the competitors. A lot of big races will have a practice day. Yes, Steve?
Hey, Jeff, on the starts or anything like that, at what point do the racers tend they not pass the start?
So, okay,
With the flag?
that depends on what flag's being flown. And I think we go into this a little bit later, but we'll cover it now real quick. So if a P flag, go back. If that P flag here is displayed, you can go over the line as many times as you want before the start. But if you're over the line at the start, you're over early and you have to go back and clear yourself and then restart. Now there's 4 other flags that we can use to control that. Like we have so Saturday, we had a lot of stuff going on. I wanted to get the first race off. So I put up a Zulu flag, a Z flag, and that is a yellow, red, blue, black flag. When that goes up, in lieu of this flag, you can still be over the start line as much as you want until that Zulu flag comes down 1 minute before the start. From 1 minute before the start to the start, if you are on the course side of the start line, even if you come back down before the start, you're going to get a 20% scoring penalty. That's just to keep you from making things too confusing. You get some aggressive fleets, and especially the way the current can be flowing sometimes, the current may want to push them over the start line early. You're having problems with the wind moving around a lot. You just want to get this race off. So you say, guys, I don't want to mess around. You put the Zulu flag up. The Zulu flag goes up. Most of them know that if that goes up, they cannot cross that start line even for a fraction of a second 1 minute before the start. And then you figure, well, they're already getting the scoring penalties, so they may as well go. No, because if you're still over the line at the start, you still have to go back and clear yourself, and yes, we're still going to give you the 20% scoring penalty. So there are ways to control the fleet. And there's another one called the I flag, which instead of just that, they have to go around one of the ends. That tends to make things worse because it makes all the boats split up to the 2 ends of the start line. So if they are over, they're quick to get back down and restart. Then there's a U flag, which is a black flag light. A black flag means you go over the start line 1 minute before the start, you're disqualified. You're not racing in that race. The U flag is a black flag light in that that same thing holds true unless I postpone or recall the race, in which case that gets erased and you get started over again. There's a bunch of ways you can go. And getting started, you're going to be dealing 99 times out of 100 with a P flag. Every once in a while, you're going to see me pull out the Zulu flag, and that's about it. But as you move up in competition, especially in one design fleets, you would use the U flag or the Z flag. And I know a lot of this is very confusing with me just brushing through this, but it is in the book. And you guys got here a little late. I don't think you've got a book.
Thank you.
Sure. But don't let yourself get worried about all this stuff. Boy, this is too confusing and all that, because as these two can tell you, it's all broken down into pieces. And when you start out, you're going to be assigned one job only. And the other thing is, we all know you're going to make a mistake, as we all continue to make mistakes. I made several mistakes on Saturday. I've been doing this for over 30 years. You make mistakes sometimes. We have enough depth and redundancy going on that we can always take care of that. It's not a big deal. So never worry about making a mistake on a race committee. You're going to. When I talk about recorders writing down sale numbers, we have a minimum of 3 people writing down sale numbers and times, usually 4 or 5, between the different boats. So if you screw up, it's not a big deal, because somebody else got you covered and they screw up in something else and you've got them covered. So it's all good. We're out there to have fun. Okay, so again, the practice races are not for the competitors, they're for the race committee. This is generally done when you have a national or world championship going on. You want to get out and make sure you get your race committee out there, because now the game level has gone up a bit, and now you're starting to get pro sailors on board, and pro sailors are going to hang you every chance they get when they make a mistake. So we want to make sure the race committee has a chance to practice. So what we will do is, even if the wind does not change during a practice race, we will do a course change and signal it, everything else, so that the competitors see that we know what we're supposed to be doing. And there are procedures to do that. It's all outlined And a good PRO will tell you before you make a course change exactly what we're gonna do, how it's gonna go, and then it only takes place once they say execute. And when they say execute, you execute. But it lets the competitors know that you're on top of how things are supposed to be done. And it lets your race committee go through that, because here in San Francisco Bay, when it's not winter, we don't do course changes because the wind just doesn't change. So it's not common here. So we like to run through practice races whenever possible. So now let's wave some flags and make some noise. This is kind of, yeah, this isn't coming out the way it's supposed to. So this is a series of multiple, let's see if I can do this without the handheld. Yep. I got out of that real quick. Well, I'm sorry about that, I pressed the wrong button. And this is a problem earlier.
While you're doing that, maybe Kyle can do it for you, and you can ask this question, Jeff. I came thinking somebody's gonna tell me why I should volunteer to be part of the SYC race committee, and I haven't heard any of that yet tonight. Did I miss the expectation? My expectations are different than your
Why
expectations.
or how?
Well, in both of them.
Okay, well,
Why, how,
as I mentioned early on, it's a volunteer sport.
I heard that. I heard
So we
it,
need-
that's in Corinthians sport.
So we
Yes,
need
sir.
volunteers to put the events on. That's why.
And it's a free lunch and a beer afterwards.
I didn't hear that. I heard the concept
That
on
was
this
solid
past
right there.
Saturday, you go up and have some beers at the ramp, but that quite didn't exist. Yeah,
Very exciting.
It is.
It's
Especially,
really exciting. It's so much fun to be out on the water. I've never been out on the water. Very, very fun.
yeah.
So what often do you go? Well, Steve goes out.
Yeah, there's typically a race about every 2 weeks or so. It
As
seems
much
like
as you
that.
want to go out.
Yeah.
For free. You don't have to pay to go out on the boat. Right, Jeff? And you get all of Jeff's
Yep.
experience at no cost. Like, you can't buy this kind of experience.
Yeah.
And you get it all free. It's not-
But it is exciting to be out on the water, like doing Mark said, when these racers are all coming to the mark, they're all yelling at each other, they're watching the teams.
I fully understand. I've been racing boats since 69.
Yeah.
I did. What's curious about SYC and their race program and their need or not need for people to
They
participate.
always need more people in the pipeline to take on the responsibility.
I'm asking Jeff.
Oh, sorry.
Thank
Well,
you.
Bob, he's involved.
Thank you.
Steve and I are on the race committee, so, it's a lot of fun, it's a great group of people, and, yeah, and please,
Yes, yes, let me say, you're on the water, which is a feng shui. It's good to be on the water. You're working with people on a boat that you get to know and respect and like. It expands your social horizons. Expands the number of people that you know. You're helping the Sausalito Yacht Club, and you feel a belonging and a membership. And it's truly a wonderful experience to be on the race committee. So I highly recommend it.
And there are some other perks we try and do, like we tried to have a tour of VTS, Vessel Traffic Service, over on Wayne Island. But the budget impasse with Congress delayed that. We're trying to get that set up again where the vessel traffic is the air traffic controllers of the bay per se. And they will open up to groups to go there, see how they manage all the ships that come in and out of the bay and everything else. And we had a day set for that, but budget cuts, the lack of budget prevented that from happening. We're trying to get that reset scheduled. So we'll have the race committee going there sometime this spring to see that, do things like that. They're kind of interesting. But it's a fun group of people. We all have a great time together.
Hold up the mic.
Yeah. I was so used to talking about it. It's a lot of fun. So we have a great time, and we do discuss how the races are doing on that signal board and what they shouldn't be doing. And so we do have fun.
There's a dinner, there's an annual dinner.
There is an annual
You get
dinner.
swag, you get
There
race-
is
you get
swag.
race committee swag. Why would you not?
And Steve did mention free cocktails after the racing. So this is not coming up properly. They're supposed to come up in a series of slides, and I don't know why I was doing that earlier today, but we've had some issues with the software on this program. Postponement and start recalls is what they're talking about. So there are two flags here. There's the X flag here, which is a white with blue cross, and underneath it is a pennant that is red and white stripe. Some people call it the cat in the hat stripe because it looks like the cat in the hat. So if I see a train wreck developing during the starting sequence and I don't want the start to continue, I can put up this postponement flag and I can stop the sequence. Or if we made a mistake during our starting sequence, say we got our timing off or something, rather than having a mess on our hands, I can put that flag up and stop the whole thing, everybody backs down, and then we start over again. On the other hand, if we go through with the race and you're over early and you're over early, we would put up this X flag, we would sound a horn, and we would announce your serial numbers over the radio. Like you're supposed to know when you're on, but we will still do it as a courtesy, announce your numbers, and then it's your responsibility to come back, clear yourself, and then restart. Once both of you have done that, we will drop that flag. You'll find some clubs will dip it for every boat that comes back to clear. That's a big no-no, because if you cleared, but you have not, you see that flag coming down, you think, oh, I must have cleared. You turn around and go back up. Well, no, you didn't, but you saw that flag come down. So it's only supposed to come down when both of you have cleared. And this is talking about changing course. So course goes to the left, course goes to the right. The wind has died down, we want to make the course shorter. The wind is built, we want to make the course longer. Some fleets require a certain number of minutes for their races to last. So you may have to adjust all that to make sure that you hit that time target that they have. So you would put up a Charlie flag, which is this flag with multiple sounds, and you're going to make this signal at the mark preceding the change. So let's say you sailed upwind, but the wind is shifted, so we're going to move the mark at the bottom of the course, left or right. At the top, we're going to put a Charlie flag up, and if we put up a green pennant or a placard with a green triangle, it means we've moved the mark to starboard. If this were a red square or a red flag, we moved it to port. If we have a plus sign, it means we've lengthened the course. If we had a minus sign, we've shortened the course. And that way they know what's going on. And then, well, I shouldn't say shorten the course. We have lengthened or shortened the length of the leg. It's important that I say length of the leg as to shorten the course, because if we don't think that the boats are going to finish within a time limit, but they still sailed a fair amount to have a fair race, and we want to shorten the course, then we can put up a Sierra flag, which is a white flag with a blue square in the middle, and that's going to be put up at the next mark with no advance notice. And once you sail past that flag, you have been finished, and you don't continue with the race. And in handicap racing around here, that is very, very rarely done. So when you put that Sierra flag up, about half the competitors will not realize that you actually shortened the course, and they'll continue sailing, and they get very upset that you never told them that their course was shortened. Well, we did. We put up the Sierra flag, and we made 2 sounds as the first boat in each division approached. That's what the rules say we do, and that lets them know. So there is some onus on competitors to know what the rules are, and there are rule seminars that are done once or twice a year around here. So if somebody's new to racing, they can go to one of those rule seminars and have all that stuff explained to them so they understand that. Okay, finishing. This is kind of a difficult part because there's only one chance to get it right. Deceptively simple. Record the boats in the order in which they finish, and sometimes it's not so easy. So, who finished there? How many boats are racing?
6.
Well, the catamaran, so there's 3. But it does throw you off, and given the angle, you may not necessarily know what's what. So, the bottom line is that it can get confusing. So you typically, what we like to do is we'll have a person call on the line on the signal boat, and then we get a mark boat be on the outside of the start line to take the finishers from that side. And we always record these not only on paper, but audio, and whenever possible, video as well. And when you're doing something like back in the 2000s when the Vallejo race had 400 boats racing, it would start on a reverse order based on how they should finish. So they all should finish at the exact same time, 400 boats. Excuse me. Still getting over my cold. So theoretically, they would all finish at the same time. Thank goodness they didn't, but you have 400 boats coming down the finish line within about 20 minutes. And you are going to make mistakes. And people don't always use all their sails. They may borrow somebody else's sails, so their spinnaker may have a different sail number than their main or their jib, which makes it really exciting. So we at times spend as much as 6 to 7 hours sorting through recording sheets from both sides of the finish line, a boat in the middle, down below the finish line, and videos and audio recordings to figure out who was what where. So it can get very complex. That's not normally the case. So then there's scoring. I don't want to go into all this, but there are scoring programs that do this. But if you decide to get certified as a race officer, they're going to put you through a scoring exercise so that you know how to score a race. And at club race officer level, they start out very simple. As you go to regional, the scoring question gets a little more difficult. Then you go to national, it gets a lot more difficult. And they know you're going to use a computerized scoring program, but there are good ones out there and there are bad ones. You need to be able to recognize if the scoring program made a mistake. And it's not just because somebody made a mistake necessarily. It could be there was a rule change. The rules change every 4 years, technically, but sometimes there are rule changes that occur within those 4 years, and they're put out in a little flyer that goes out that not everybody sees. And it makes a difference in how races are scored. So they want to make sure you're keeping up on that kind of stuff so you're aware of what's going on. So as it says, web-based systems, Regatta Network is what we use here. There's yacht scoring. There's a program that I prefer to use, which is called the Club Spot. It handles registration and scoring and everything. It is more intuitive to one design racing, which is most of what I tend to do, versus Regatta Network is geared more towards handicap racing. So it's a matter of what kind of races you're going to manage as to what scoring program you may want to use. The big thing is you always run a practice race beforehand. Even with no people, just make up a race in your head and score it and run through the scoring program so you know how it works. But again, when you get started, you're not gonna be thrown to the wolves and, be told, you go do this. If you want to do it, you'll be going along with somebody who is experienced at running the scoring program, and they will show you how to do it numerous times until you're comfortable doing it on your own. Okay, protests. Here's a good situation for a protest. We have a little bit of a problem here. This is minor. There's probably some yelling and screaming going on, and so there are provisions in the sale instructions on how to file a protest and when you file a protest. That must be followed. And fortunately, as race committee, we generally don't have to get involved with it. We're off relaxing after a long day on the water and all that. We have a separate protest committee that we bring in to do this. It will many times be done the afternoon after the racing. But since COVID, a lot of it has switched over to being Zoom calls. I personally don't care for them, but that seems to be the norm these days. So it may be like we had the collision on Saturday, that hearing is being held tomorrow on a Zoom call meeting. And in this case, it's pretty cut and dry, because both parties agree to what happened. It's just an insurance deal. But there are others where people are adamantly convinced that they were in the right and so forth. And body language and so forth don't show on a Zoom call like they do in person. But that's for the protest committee to do, that's not for me. And then here's how to get involved. A, volunteer. Extra hands are always welcome. Race duty will also make you a better sailor, and it does. If every single sailor, competitive sailor, worked on the race committee one day a year, first off, we would have more race committee than we know what to do with. The problem is, none of them want to volunteer, generally speaking. But it does make them a better sailor. When we do get a competitor on a committee boat working, they come off the boat saying, I learned a lot today. Not just about what we do, although they do get a better appreciation of what we do, but they were able to watch a race from an unbiased standpoint and see what was going on and say, that guy got it all totally wrong, this guy had it totally right, and they process that information so the next time they're racing, they do a better job. Participate. Don't just be an observer, wave some flags, pull some marks, gain experience. It's nice, it's great to get on the water. Saturday, while the wind was frustrating, it was actually kind of a nice day. It wasn't too cold. It was cool, but it wasn't too cold. It wasn't very wet. Well, was it for you? Okay, good. Didn't want to be lying there. And then, if you want, you get certified. And as I mentioned, Steve got certified, I'm certified. I don't know if anybody else in here is certified tonight, but you do not have to be a certified race officer to run a sailboat race. But it helps. And the reason U.S. Sailing wants you certified is because there are groups out there who don't follow the practices that U.S. Sailing prescribes. And not that they know everything, but it is consistency from club to club to club. So if you're going to race on San Francisco Bay, and then you go to Biscayne Bay in Miami, you know that the race is going to be run pretty much the same way. The same flags are going to be used, the same starting sequence is going to be used, the same philosophy of trying to keep the course square and so forth is going to be used. That's what it does. That's the whole idea of the certification. And if you are certified, you're able to get some liability insurance for dirt cheap. It's $100 a year for $11 million of coverage. Now, I don't want to scare you to think that you're going to get sued. There's only been 3 lawsuits in 15 years, and they were all at higher level events. So the odds of you getting sued are slim, slim, slim. But suppose you're driving a Markset boat and you run into a competitor and you destroy the boat. Your insurance, you have your own liability insurance, but you're not going to use that for this. So the club has some liability insurance, but you can also get some to cover you as well in case somebody comes after you personally. And it's, like I say, it's $100 a year for $11 million of coverage.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
If I run in another boat, where do I have my own liability insurance that will cover that?
You would not want to use your own liability.
Where would I have my own liability?
What do you mean, where would you have it? Your own personal liability.
From where?
Possibly if you have a general liability policy in conjunction with your home insurance policy.
Possibly.
Yeah, but you may not. And that's why the ability to get some
So
for $100 a year is a great deal. So, any questions? Yes.
A while ago. but
Well, why didn't you, darn it?
I don't know. I don't know why I was scared. Why don't you do more trapezoid courses? Or why don't you do any trapezoid courses?
Because they're not really necessary. So, the trapezoid course is designed to have 2 different fleets racing on the same body of water. So we had 5 fleets running the other day. And we did it in one triangle, or one up and down course inside another up and down course, and it worked out fine. In fact, this is interesting to hear, the J105s told me, when I took the boat back over to San Francisco Yacht Club, they told me they don't see a reason for us to have 2 courses. They're perfectly happy with having all the other boats on the same course as them. Now, I'm gonna put a survey out to the other fleets to see if they feel the same way, but generally we have, and we can space them out pretty well from when we start each fleet, so they don't interact too much. But the idea when we're doing, junior sailing involves a ton of kids, a ton, like a couple hundred kids on the water in a day. And they're getting as many divisions out as they can, and while they're short races, they gotta get them off pretty quick. So if you can get one fleet going up, they go up to the river mark, they reach across, and now they're going on an up and down course over here, and you have another fleet going up and down over here. You've got 2 fleets going with absolutely no interference with each other, and you bang them out. That's about the only time you'll ever see them here, but it's usually at the lower levels where they have a whole bunch of kids. By the time they get into high school sailing, they're not doing trapezoid courses anymore. They're just not necessary. But that's how US Sailing does it, because they're banging out a bunch of races. And a typical race is gonna run maybe 30 minutes. And they're gonna be doing this all day long.
And you wouldn't do it just to like prepare you or the sailors for?
Well, so the more marks you put in the water, the more support boats you have to have. Number one, we all have a dearth of MarkSet volunteers. That's the most difficult job to get covered, is people working on mark boats. And so to really manage a trapezoid course properly, you need to have 4 support boats. That means you have to have a minimum of 8 mark boat volunteers. We struggle to get 4 mark boat volunteers with 2 boats. So that's a lot of it. Now, if you go into, we talked about match racing real quick. That one's pretty easy to manage, but if you go into team racing, the course for a team race is what's called a digital N. They go up, they reach across, square across, they come down, they go square across, they come up, and then they go down and finish. And it's a 6-minute race. Yeah, 6 minutes. And if you're running a full team race, it is 256 races in 3 days. It's a lot.
Is this the race in this photo behind you?
There was a ship coming into San Francisco Bay, and everybody came out to greet it. Like, that looks kind of like what the Vallejo race used to be when there were 400 boats coming down San Pablo Bay. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
So, other questions? Yes.
Signal flags, are they announced on VHF? Signal flag changes.
You don't have to. So when I first got started doing this, it was an adversarial position between the race committee and the competitors, which was stupid. And they would hide the flags to the last minute, so nobody knew what flag you were going to put up or anything else. And what difference does it make? So when was it? In the mid 90s or late 90s, actually early 2000s, the starting sequence changed from a 10-minute sequence to a 5-minute sequence. And it gave us a lot more flexibility, because before you had to publish the order of the boats, of the fleets, how they were going to start, and you had to maintain that order. The new system allows us to pick and choose. I mean, generally, you'll publish the order for the first race, but after the first race, you can restart them in any order based on the class flag, and they know to look for that. So then it became advantageous to tell them so they had an idea. I when I first took over as race committee chair at Golden Gate Yacht Club 30 years ago, I took it from the standpoint of a sales position. I want to get as many boats racing as possible, so I want to make it as user-friendly within the rules as possible to make it easier for them so they want to come out and race. So I'm not going to hold their hand through the entire race, but I'm going to give them some extra information ahead of time to make it easier. So you can, but you will get a lot of competitors complaining that you're giving them too much information over the radio because it means too much chatter on the radio. And then some fleets don't allow radios on the boats. So you can't communicate to them other than with the flag signals. Any other questions? Okay, so we have a race coming up on March 21st, 22nd. I expect to see all of you there. And we'll get you on the water and we'll have a great time. Thank you for listening to me tonight. I'm sorry my voice is a little off. And I'm sorry we have some issues with the computer, but thank you very much.
We do have a recording of it.